It is widely believed that Shrek was modeled after Maurice Tillett, aka the world's ugliest man. He was a celebrated pro wrestler in the 1940s who suffered from acromegaly, a condition that results in bone overgrowth and thickening. Despite the rumors, DreamWorks has never openly commented on this. All of the snow used in The Wizard of Oz was 100% pure asbestos. The 1981 movie Roar is considered to be the most dangerous film to ever shoot. Over 70 crew members who worked with the animals suffered injuries like bone fractures, scalpings, and gangrene. Much of the footage capturing the injuries was included in the film, resulting in a lot of real blood on screen. Photographer Atif Saeed nearly got himself killed in order to capture this photo, which was taken just moments before the lion tried to attack him. He drove up to the lion, sat on the ground next to his car, and left the door open. The door being left open was the only reason he was able to escape unharmed. In case anyone is wondering what happened to the dinosaurs, here's what a baby blue heron looks like. The Bajau people of Southeast Asia are considered sea nomads. They have no homes, money, or nationalities, and they spend 60% of their time underwater. They can go spearfishing at depths greater than 200 feet without scuba gear or oxygen tanks. They've even developed much larger spleens than the average human thanks to evolution. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was driving to a friend's party when he crashed his car into a ditch. He called his dad to come pick him up, but he couldn't find him, despite knowing the area very well. Eventually, Brandon started walking and said he was approaching something that looked like a city up the road. Suddenly, Brandon yelled, "Oh shit!" and his phone went silent. His car was later found abandoned in the ditch, just as he had described it. But no city could have been anywhere near the area he was walking in. Brandon Swanson is still missing to this day, with very little evidence found since. In 1964, the U.S. Army performed an experiment to see if 3 young physics students could design an atomic bomb. They had no specific knowledge of nuclear weapons and were only given access to publicly available documents. Within 3 years, they succeeded. Over 160 years ago, a Frenchman and a Russian shot at each other during the Crimean War and their bullets collided. During World War II, a Nazi officer ordered his soldiers to hold their fire to allow for the rescue of an American soldier who had stepped on a landmine. When no one came for help, the officer went to rescue the soldier but stepped on a landmine himself. Horseshoe crabs have been around for 450 million years and have blue blood. Instead of hemoglobin, their blood contains hemocyanin, which gets its blue color from oxygenated copper. Their blood is so valuable to the medical industry that a gallon costs around $60,000. The sting of the tarantula hawk wasp is so unbearable that victims are often advised to lie down and start screaming to avoid further injury. In 2018, Russian scientists collected and analyzed 300 prehistoric worms from Arctic permafrost. After being thawed, 2 of the worms began to move and eat. Both of the worms are estimated to be well over 30,000 years old. Pablo Escobar's nephew still lives in one of the drug lord's apartments in Medellin. He recently found $18 million in cash hidden away in a plastic bag behind a wall. He told Colombian media that a vision told him where to look for the cash. A Russian man who tried to rob a hair salon ended up as the victim when the female shop owner overpowered him. She tied him up naked and used him as a sex slave for several days. Peruvian Mayor Jaime Rolando Urbina Torres broke the nationwide lockdown to go drinking with friends. When authorities attempted to apprehend him, the drunken mayor jumped into an empty coffin that was lying near him and pretended to be dead. During World War II, the Polish army officially enlisted a brown bear named Wojtek. He enjoyed drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, and wrestling, as he served as a morale booster for soldiers. Bill Millen was a personal piper who played his bagpipes on D-Day while his fellow comrades were getting killed all around him. The only reason German snipers didn't shoot him was because they thought he had gone mad. During the Vietnam War, John Donahue took a plane from New York City and snuck into the war zone to deliver beer to his buddies. It is known as the greatest beer run ever, and there have been multiple documentaries made about it. In 2013, a group of burglars stole a bunch of computers from an office building. But they soon returned the items with this note because they realized they had stolen from a non-profit group that helps victims of sexual abuse. These are shoes made to look like cow hooves that were worn by moonshiners to hide their tracks during Prohibition. Serial killer Robert Hansen was responsible for the murders of at least 17 women throughout the 70s and 80s. He would first abduct his victims and fly them to his isolated cabin in the Alaskan mountains, which was only accessible by boat or plane. He would then release them and hunt them down like wild animals, using a knife or hunting rifle. During World War II, Yang Kyung-jong was a Korean soldier who was captured by the Japanese and forced to fight the Soviets. He was then captured by the Soviets and forced to fight the Germans. Eventually, he was captured by the Germans and forced to defend Normandy, where he was finally captured by Americans and sent to a prison camp. He is the only known soldier to have ever fought on 3 sides of a war. During World War II, many zoo animals in Germany were taken care of by civilians in their own homes. In 1961, the U.S. Army accidentally dropped a hydrogen bomb on North Carolina. The bomb was 260 times more powerful than the nuke dropped on Hiroshima. Only a single switch prevented it from detonating. In 1957, a stray dog named Laika became the first animal to ever orbit the Earth when she was the occupant of the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2. The dog was originally reported to have died painlessly in orbit about 1 week after blastoff. But nearly 50 years later, it was revealed that she likely died from overheating and panic just a few hours after the mission started. The entire planet Saturn is less dense than water. This means that if there was a pool big enough for it, the planet would float. Soviet cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev got stuck in space during the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Since the country that sent him into space had no longer existed, his return home was delayed. He stayed in space for 311 days, twice as long as the mission originally called for. Johnny Depp said he based his depiction of Willy Wonka on how he imagined former President George W. Bush to act while stoned. This is what the set of the original black and white Addams Family TV show looked like in color. The actor who played Danny in The Shining didn't know it was a horror movie until he was done with filming. He was led to believe that he was just filming a drama movie of a family that lives in a hotel. A group of psychologists studied 400 movies to find the most realistic psychopath, and the winner was Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. They said that he seems to be effectively invulnerable and resistant to any form of humanity or emotion. In the year 2000, 18-year-old Zeb Quinn went missing after finishing his shift at a Walmart in North Carolina. His car was discovered 2 weeks later in a restaurant parking lot under mysterious circumstances. Its headlights were still on, a big pair of lips were drawn on the back windshield with red lipstick, and a live Labrador puppy was found inside the car. But otherwise, very little evidence has been found, and Zeb Quinn remains missing to this day. In 1979, a 13-year-old girl named Diane Dye told her friend that she was gonna run away for a few days. Since her parents were getting divorced, Diane thought this would bring them back together. So she did what she said but never came back, and she remains missing more than 40 years later. During World War I, Hungarian soldier Paul Kern was shot in the head and lost part of his frontal lobe. However, instead of killing him, the gunshot otherwise made him unable to sleep. And as a result, the man stayed awake for the next 40 years until his death in 1955. A few doctors theorized that Kern likely fell asleep for seconds at a time throughout the day without even realizing it. Other doctors believed that the bullet tore away the part of his brain that needed to be replenished by sleep. But to this day, researchers still can't explain how he was able to survive for so long without sleeping. This manta ray caught off the coast of New Jersey in 1933 was one of the largest ever caught. It weighed over 5,000 pounds and had a wingspan more than 20 feet wide. Cats have contributed to the extinction of at least 63 global vertebrate species. They are often considered one of the most environmentally damaging invasive predators on the planet. In the ideal environment, 2 rats can turn into 482 million rats over a span of just 3 years. The orca whale who starred in Free Willy was released back into the wild in 2002 after being in captivity for 23 years. A few weeks after his release, he showed up at a Norwegian beach in hopes of seeking human contact. He would even give rides to children on his back. Real bees were used during the filming of the 90s horror trilogy Candyman. Over the course of the 3 movies, actor Tony Todd got stung 23 times. The producers paid him $1,000 per sting. The gory horror film Cannibal Holocaust was so realistic that the director was charged with murder. Cast and crew members had to appear before an Italian court to prove that the film's special effects were not actual torture. The Nightmare Before Christmas had 24 frames to a second, meaning they had to pose characters 24 times for each second of the movie. In total, the movie consisted of roughly 110,000 frames. In 1954, Ann Hodges was hit by a softball-sized meteorite while taking a nap in her Alabama home. The odds of this happening are less likely than winning the Powerball, as Hodges was put in the history books as being the only human to ever be hit by a meteorite. This is the clearest photo ever taken on the surface of Venus. If the sun was scaled down to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be the size of the continental United States. When Michael Collins took this photo in 1969, he was the only human, living or dead, not contained within the frame of it. While it may look edited, this is just a photo of the giant African land snail. While often considered to be an invasive species, they can be kept as pets. They can live for several years and can grow up to 8 inches long. Photographer Herbert van der Beek captured this extremely rare moment of a jaguar diving underwater to catch its prey. Leoconcha hieroglyphica is a mollusk that received its name because it looks like it's covered in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Only discovered in 1976, the megamouth shark is an extremely rare species of deep water shark. Less than 100 of them have ever been seen or caught. Although they look nothing alike, the stunningly iridescent Nicobar pigeon is the closest living relative to the extinct dodo bird. On July 14, 2017, Chester Bennington appeared in a carpool karaoke episode with comedian Ken Jeong. In the video, Chester looks joyful and full of life, laughing, cracking jokes, and singing along to Linkin Park hits as well as popular songs like Hey Ya. The footage offers a bittersweet glimpse of a man who appeared to be genuinely happy just 6 days before he tragically took his own life. In 1993, a Mexican zoo official was arrested in Miami after trying to illegally purchase a live gorilla, only to discover the animal was actually an undercover agent in a gorilla suit. The operation was part of a federal wildlife trafficking bust and led to one of the most ridiculous arrests in American history. As a child in the Philippines, boxing legend Manny Pacquiao ran away from home after witnessing a horrifying act. His father, drunk and enraged, killed and ate the family's pet dog. Devastated, Pacquiao fled and began living on the streets, sleeping in a cardboard box and surviving by selling donuts and scraps. The trauma of watching that happen to his beloved pet pushed him into a life of brutal survival at just 12 years old, an early glimpse of the hardship and violence that would define his relentless drive in the ring. In 2020, Tim Bleefnick appeared on Family Feud and joked that the biggest mistake he made at his wedding was saying "I do."
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding? Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. Not my mistake. I love my wife.
But 3 years later, in February of 2023, his estranged wife Rebecca Bleefnick was found shot 14 times in their home while their 3 young boys were upstairs. The couple had apparently been going through a bitter divorce, and Tim went to the extreme to deal with it. He was arrested, convicted of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When 36-year-old Heather McManamy was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she began writing dozens of greeting cards for her young daughter to open in the years after she was gone, covering birthdays, graduations, heartbreaks, and even her wedding day. Each card was filled with love, jokes, and advice, allowing her daughter to still receive words of comfort and celebration long after Heather's death in 2015. It was her way of staying present for every milestone she knew she wouldn't live to see. Morbid Facts, Part 654. In the months leading up to his death, actor and comedian Chris Farley was visibly deteriorating, sweating profusely, coughing up blood, and often unable to walk without assistance. His appearances on SNL and late-night shows became increasingly erratic as producers began to fear he might die right on set. On December 18, 1997, he was found face down in his Chicago apartment wearing only a shirt after several days of binging on alcohol and hard drugs. The last person to see him alive was a sex worker he had hired named Heidi Hauser. As she was leaving, Farley reportedly followed her down the hall while begging her, "Don't leave me, please don't leave me," which were likely his final words. The cause of death was a speedball overdose, a lethal mix of cocaine and morphine. Eerily, Farley idolized John Belushi and always said he wanted to be just like him, even saying in sketches, "I'll probably go out like Belushi." Both comedians died of speedball overdoses at the young age of 33. Christina Formella, a 30-year-old special ed teacher and soccer coach at a high school in Illinois, is facing 55 felony charges tied to alleged misconduct with a student that reportedly began when he was just 14 years old. Authorities claim the inappropriate relationship lasted nearly 2 years and involved over 50 encounters, many occurring on school grounds during class hours and some at the teacher's own home while her husband was away. The case began after the student's mother found concerning messages on the boy's phone, prompting Formella's arrest in March of 2025. Investigators later uncovered writings where Formella accused the student of cheating on her and even mentioned plans to take her husband's money and disappear. But despite these allegations, her husband has continued to stand by her, even accompanying her to court appearances while holding her hand. Formella has pleaded not guilty to her charges and is out on bond under strict conditions. If convicted, she faces up to 60 years in prison. Known online as Pioneers Productions, Randy Stair became obsessed with the cartoon Danny Phantom and was convinced that he'd be reincarnated as a character on the show named Ember. While working a night shift at a grocery store in Pennsylvania, he blocked all the exits, pulled out 2 shotguns, and murdered 3 coworkers before turning the gun on himself in the frozen foods aisle. Police later uncovered a trove of videos and writings outlining his delusions and plans, in which he explained his belief that these murders would allow him to cross over into the animated world of Danny Phantom. During a morning broadcast in 1974, Florida news reporter Christine Chubbuck calmly announced, "In keeping with Channel 40's policy of bringing you the latest in blood and guts, you're going to see another first, attempted suicide." She then proceeded to take her own life on live TV. Many viewers and even people in the control room assumed it was a scripted segment or a special effects stunt. Christine had reportedly long struggled with depression, loneliness, and frustration over the channel's focus on violent topics and sensationalism. Her death completely shocked the nation and remains one of the most disturbing moments in broadcast history. Dr. Fauci's NIH division, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, funded a series of horrific experiments on beagle puppies between 2016 and 2020. One of the most graphic studies involved dogs placed in mesh cages while sandflies were allowed to bite and feed on their heads, allegedly to study how certain parasites are transmitted in hopes of improving treatments for parasitic infections affecting humans. Some dogs were reportedly devocalized to prevent barking and were euthanized at the end of the studies. While Fauci wasn't personally conducting the tests, his agency approved the funding of about $375,000 for the research. Critics, including lawmakers and animal rights groups, condemned the studies as unnecessarily cruel and accused the NIH of lacking transparency and ethical oversight in approving such horrific procedures. The incident sparked widespread outrage online, with many calling for Dr. Fauci to be held responsible for the funding decisions made under his leadership. There were countless serious warning signs leading up to the implosion of the OceanGate Titan submersible. Experts repeatedly flagged the vessel's experimental design, particularly its carbon fiber hull, which is prone to microscopic weaknesses under deep-sea pressure. Former OceanGate employees raised alarms about structural integrity, previous dive malfunctions, the fact that the sub's navigation system relied on a modded Xbox controller, and over 100 documented equipment issues, including a 2022 incident where passengers heard alarming cracking sounds as the pressure increased. But despite this, OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush pushed forward, publicly dismissing regulation as a barrier to innovation. In fact, the warning signs were so clearly numerous that after the implosion, many have speculated that Rush may have even had suicidal intentions, citing his repeated disregard for safety warnings and his presence on board during the fatal dive, though no evidence has officially confirmed this theory. Actor Daniel Hovels accidentally slit his own throat on stage during a 2008 theatrical performance after his prop knife was somehow switched out for a real one. The audience initially thought it was all just an elaborate special effect. The blade had just barely missed Hovels' carotid artery, but he was back on stage the next day. The leading cause of death for pregnant and postpartum women in America is homicide. This is often driven by partner violence that is escalated or triggered by the pregnancy, stemming from jealousy, fear of responsibility, and financial stress. In 2014, a crematorium in Virginia caught fire during the cremation of a 500-pound body. The excessive body fat caused the furnace to overheat, igniting the building's roof. A Florida musician known as Prince Midnight constructed a fully functional electric guitar he dubbed the Skelecaster, using the skeletal remains of his deceased Uncle Philip. Philip had donated his skeleton to a medical college in Greece, but after 2 decades, the school no longer had any use for them, so the remains were returned to his family. Prince Midnight decided to honor his uncle, who introduced him to heavy metal music, by turning his ribcage, spinal column, and pelvis into a guitar. Morbid Facts, Part 601. In one of the most horrifying cases of human captivity, Joseph Fritzl imprisoned his own daughter Elizabeth in a hidden basement beneath their Austrian home for 24 years, beginning in 1984. He repeatedly tortured and raped her, fathering 7 of her children, 3 of whom were raised in the underground dungeon without ever seeing daylight. The space was initially built as a bomb shelter and had no windows, was soundproofed, and could only be accessed through a series of hidden electronically locked doors that Fritzl installed himself. The monster kept up a front by convincing authorities and his wife that Elizabeth had joined a cult, even forging letters to support the lie. But the case was exposed in 2008 when one of the captive children fell critically ill and was brought to a hospital, prompting an investigation. Fritzl was arrested, convicted of many awful crimes, and sentenced to life in a psychiatric facility. The dungeon was later sealed with concrete, while Elizabeth and her surviving children were placed under new identities. A flight attendant named Sheila Frederick noticed a terrified girl who was accompanied by an older man on a flight. Sheila discreetly told the girl to go to the bathroom, where she left a note asking if she was okay. The girl went to the bathroom and wrote, "I need help," on the note. The police were waiting when the plane landed, and the girl was saved from a human trafficker. This is a photo of a police canine being saluted by officers before entering the vet to be put down. This mother horse lost her baby while in labor. 2 days later, she was given a foal who had lost her mother, and this was the photo taken after they were introduced. A 67-year-old named Dorothy Fletcher once had a heart attack while on a flight. When a stewardess asked if there was a doctor on the flight, 15 people stood up. They happened to be on their way to a cardiology conference, and the woman was saved.